We've spoken about Iran, we've spoken about Saudi Arabia, but no country in the Middle East is causing more problems right now than Syria. Run by a tyrannical dictator, the Syrian civil war has so far seen hundreds of thousands killed and millions displaced. With the war and resulting refugee crisis flooding the news, it's easy to forget the rich history of one of the world's most ancient lands. Hello and welcome to In Focus. Syria has a deep and important history, boasting one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. There's evidence of remains dating back over 800,000 years, and it's home to some of the earliest agricultural and cattle breeding programs recorded around 10,000 years BC. People were making art 5,000 years later, and written language was prolific by at least 2,500 BC. Syria's capital of Damascus is among the oldest continually inhabited cities in the world. Syria fell under the Persian, Greek, Roman, Islamic, and Ottoman empires before the modern state was established following World War I. When drawing up national borders, the Allies didn't give much thought to the religious diversity that existed in the region and the potential for future conflict across the Middle East. Syria itself is comprised of Sunnis, Christians, Alawites, Druze, Mandaeans, Shiites, Salafis, and Yazidis. The nation went through a number of official name changes over the years, going from the Kingdom of Syria to the Syrian Federation, then the Syrian Republic, the United Arab Republic, and finally the Syrian Arab Republic, which it remains today. That brings us to the corrective movement. In November 1970, General Hafiz al-Assad led a coup d'etat in Syria. Afterwards, al-Assad tried to reach out to the rest of the Arab world and indeed began to cooperate with Egypt and Saudi Arabia in an alliance against Israel. When Egypt and Syria lost the Yom Kippur War, Saudi Arabia stopped selling oil to America and the West, causing the 1973 energy crisis. The elder al-Assad led Syria until his death in June 2000. Immediately afterwards, the parliament changed the constitution, reducing the mandatory minimum age to be president from 40 to 34. Take a guess as to who was 34 years old at that particular moment in time. Yes, Bashar Hafiz al-Assad. He ran unopposed, mainly because no one was allowed to run against him, and received an unbelievable 99.7% of the vote. I say unbelievable because I literally refuse to believe that percentage. Strangely enough, people initially looked to Bashar as a potential reformer. Those hopes collapsed pretty quickly. Syria and the US were kind of friends for a while there. After 9/11, the Syrian government helped out with the war on terror and even tortured prisoners when the US asked them nicely. But in 2005, the former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri was assassinated. He was a pretty close friend with the West too, and there was evidence that Syria was behind the killing. The US recalled their ambassador. Obama initially wanted to get back together with Syria, kind of, but then the civil war happened. It began during the wider Arab Spring protests, which began in December 2010. In March the following year, peaceful protests began in Damascus, demanding democratic reform and the release of political prisoners. Security forces responded by opening fire. 5 days later, a Ba'ath Party headquarters building was burned down. 7 police officers and 15 protesters were killed. Protesters who had initially called for just democratic reforms were now calling for al-Assad's head. Members of Syria's armed forces began defecting to form the Free Syrian Army, a group now heavily backed by the US, Turkey, and their allies in the Persian Gulf. The war itself has become incredibly messy and is impossible to discuss in just a few minutes. Besides the Free Syrian Army, a number of other groups joined the fight, each looking to capitalize on the confusion and disharmony caused by the conflict. Al-Qaeda strengthened their position within Syria, the Kurds continued to wage war in their battle for independence, and of course, we all know about ISIS. It raises the question, who is the greater evil now, al-Assad or the Islamic State? World leaders are torn on the issue. The future of Syria may well depend on the outcome of the US presidential election. Should a hawkish Republican gain power, the country may well be bombed, leading to tension with Russia not seen since the Cold War. On the flip side, there is a growing thought that the US should leave dictators like Assad in power due to unforeseeable and potentially worse results, a la Iraq, where several pundits equate the overthrow of Saddam Hussein with the rise of ISIL. It's hard to know what to make of the recent ceasefire in Syria, but a return to normality and diplomatic relations with the West is almost certainly not going to happen under the rule of Bashar al-Assad. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.